Okay, get ready to dive deep because today we're taking a look at the holiday classic, Elf. But,
Yeah.
we're not just going to, like, watch Buddy prance around New York, are we?
Right.
We've got IMDb data and a whole bunch of user reviews, so we're going to get into, like, all the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah.
Really figure out, like, is this just a sweet holiday movie, or is there something more going on?
Well, I think that's what's so fascinating about Elf. It's become this like huge cultural phenomenon.
Right.
But when it first came out, critics were kind of divided on it. It's a
Oh.
really good example of how like what audiences think about a movie can actually change over time.
Especially comedies.
Especially comedies, yeah.
And, thinking about, like, Jon Favreau's career.
Right.
It's kind of interesting where Elf falls, right?
Yeah.
This is before Iron Man, even for Zathura.
Right.
I mean, at that point, he was known for that indie charm, not like big blockbuster stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you think that background like affected Elf?
I think it's really important, actually. I think he brought that indie sensibility to this like big studio holiday film. You can see it in like how much they improvised and the way they focused on the characters instead of just the plot.
Yeah.
He really let Will Ferrell just go crazy, which
Yeah.
could have been a total disaster,
Right.
but somehow it totally works.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So we're already seeing this like tension between like what the studio probably wanted from a holiday movie
Yeah.
and then Favreau's more indie style.
Right.
So let's get into some of that IMDb data and see if we can see that tension.
Yeah.
Okay, so Elf was a total box office hit, made over $230 million worldwide back in 2003.
Wow.
But like beyond just the numbers, what are some of the details about the production that stand out to you?
I mean, the casting is just amazing. James Carradine as the dad, all grumpy.
Right.
Bob Newhart as Papa Elf. It's like perfect casting against type.
Yeah.
It gives the movie way more depth than if it was just a slapstick comedy.
And then you have Zooey Deschanel as Jovi,
Yeah.
who, has become this total indie darling.
Right.
But this was pretty early in her career.
Yeah.
And her, like, deadpan kind of charm works so well next to Ferrell going completely bonkers.
Yeah.
It's like they're from totally different comedic worlds.
Totally. Yeah, it's wild. And it really shows how much Favreau was willing to take risks with casting, you know?
Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily think to put those two together.
No.
But their chemistry is just undeniable.
Yeah.
I think it adds to that, like, outsider feeling that runs through the whole movie.
Yeah, totally.
Which I think is, like, a big reason why people love it.
Okay, so before we get to the reviews,
Yeah.
we got to talk about the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Jim Carrey almost played Buddy.
Wow.
IMDb has it listed as a what if, and honestly, it's hard to imagine anyone else doing it.
I know, right?
But if Carrey was Buddy, what kind of movie do you think we would have gotten?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Carrey, especially in the early 2000s, he was known for that, like, totally manic energy, like, really in-your-face comedy.
Yeah.
So Elf could have been way more cartoonish, with more just, like, crazy physical gags.
Yeah.
But Ferrell, while definitely being, like, physical and over the top, he also brings this, like, real sweetness to Buddy.
Yes.
He's genuinely vulnerable. It's a much harder thing to do, and I think that's why the movie ends up being surprisingly touching.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's this balance between the sweetness and how crazy it is.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing to do because, like, if it's too much of one or the other, it could have been like, oh, too sweet, or just dumb.
Totally.
So let's see how people actually reacted to this balancing act.
Okay, let's get into the reviews, because they're all over the place.
Yeah.
You've got people saying it's a new Christmas classic,
Right.
and others who just can't stand it.
Yeah.
And it's not even just about whether they laughed or not. It's about what kind of humor they like, what they want from a holiday movie.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
One of the things that people praise the most is obviously Will Ferrell's performance.
Oh, yeah.
People say he's brilliant and inspired.
Yeah.
And they really like how much he commits to Buddy being so naive.
Right.
But then some people are like, no, he's just annoying and over the top.
Yeah, you get both sides.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, because those same things people are praising, his energy, how much he goes all in on being ridiculous, that's also what annoys people.
Yeah.
It's definitely a style that not everyone loves. But I think Ferrell's performance is actually more subtle than people give him credit for.
Oh, okay. I'm interested. Tell me more about that. The subtlety.
Okay, so, like, anyone can act goofy, right?
Right.
But Ferrell actually makes you feel for Buddy.
Yeah.
Like, there are moments where you can see he's actually hurt under all that naivete, especially when he's with his real dad.
Right.
And it's those moments, those little flashes of real emotion that make the character more than just a joke.
Yeah.
They make him real.
And that goes back to what you were saying about Favreau directing it.
Right.
Like, he made room for those moments, even with all the chaos going on.
Exactly.
Now, another thing people can't agree on is the plot itself.
Oh, yeah.
Some people think it's heartwarming and cute,
Yeah.
but others say it's predictable and way too sentimental.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it comes down to this bigger question about holiday movies in general. Like, how much cynicism versus how much sentimentality.
Right.
And Elf is definitely sentimental.
Yeah.
Even with all the silliness, it tries to make you feel things, you know?
Yeah.
It's about family, belonging, believing in something bigger than yourself.
Right.
Which are all powerful themes.
Especially during the holidays.
Exactly. But for some people, it's just too much sweetness, not enough, like, spice.
Like they're expecting something more clever?
Yeah, more sarcastic.
Yeah.
Maybe even making fun of how commercialized the holidays are.
Right.
But instead they get, like, a full blast of sincerity.
Exactly.
Mm.
And that sincerity seems to be what really divides people.
Yeah.
You know, some people love how it makes them feel that childlike wonder and Christmas spirit. Like,
Yeah.
they get nostalgic and ready for the holidays.
Right.
And then you have other people who are like, ugh, this is so cheesy and sappy.
Yeah, too sweet.
Too sweet.
I think it just shows different people's tastes.
Yeah.
But also maybe, like, a generational difference.
Oh, interesting.
You know, Elf came out in 2003.
Right.
And back then, being ironic and detached was really cool, especially in comedy.
Uh-huh.
But maybe for a younger audience or even for older people who are tired of cynicism,
Yeah.
Elf offers something different, like genuine emotion, you know, being unashamedly sentimental.
So is Elf just a guilty pleasure, something to help us escape the real world for a bit? Or is there actually something deeper going on?
That's a good question.
Well, we'll try to figure that out as we continue our deep dive.
So welcome back to our deep dive into Elf. We've talked about, like, Favreau directing it, Ferrell's performance.
Right. And that whole, like, sweet but also totally bonkers thing the movie has going on.
Uh-huh.
But what about the humor itself?
Yeah, the humor.
Because the reviews are all over the place.
They really are. Some people think it's hilarious. Others are like, this is just dumb kid stuff.
Yeah.
So is it all just Will Ferrell being funny, or is there something more to it, you know?
I think you have to remember that comedy is often about, like, messing with what people expect.
Okay.
And Elf does that in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
You've got Buddy, this giant man-child,
Right.
acting like a crazy elf.
Yeah.
He's totally out of place in New York City.
Right.
And that clash, you know, those different worlds colliding, that's funny.
Yeah, like the classic fish out of water story.
Exactly. But
Okay.
Elf takes it even further by making Buddy so ridiculously optimistic.
Yeah.
It's not just that he's naive, he's like aggressively cheerful.
Yeah.
And that throws everyone off.
Throws everyone off, yeah.
And that's where Ferrell is just brilliant.
Yeah.
He commits to the joke so hard that you can't help but laugh.
Even if the jokes themselves are kind of silly, you know?
Uh-huh.
He never breaks character, never lets you in on the joke. It's
Yeah.
that sincerity that makes it work.
Okay, but what about the people who say the humor gets old?
Okay. Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of physical gags, lots of yelling, lots of Buddy just being Buddy.
Sure.
Does it ever get to be too much?
It's a good point. I mean, Elf definitely has a certain style of humor.
Yeah.
Slapstick, wordplay, big reactions.
Right.
That can get repetitive if there's nothing else to balance it out.
Yeah.
But I think Favreau knows that. You know, he's aware of that.
Okay, so what makes you say that?
Look at how he uses the other characters, like James Karen, the grumpy dad.
Right.
He's the perfect opposite of Buddy's crazy energy.
Yeah.
He's all cynical and frustrated, which makes Buddy even funnier.
Mm.
And then you've got Zooey Deschanel, who's so quiet and subtle.
Right.
She doesn't try to be funnier than Ferrell. She just plays it straight.
Yeah.
And that creates this great tension.
Like they're all playing different instruments in the same band.
Exactly. Ferrell's like, the lead singer belting it out.
Yeah.
But you need the bass and drums to hold it all together.
Right, the rhythm section.
And Favreau also uses visuals really well, like when Buddy decorates the store with paper snowflakes.
Oh, yeah.
Or that giant snow globe he builds in his dad's apartment.
Right.
It's not just about the words or the physical comedy. It's about creating these images that you remember.
Yeah, memorable moments.
That add to how ridiculous it all is.
So we've talked about how Elf has its own style of comedy.
Right.
Which some people love and some people hate.
Uh-huh.
But let's step back for a second. Even the people who don't love the humor often admit that the movie has become a classic.
A Christmas classic.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think it goes back to what we were saying before about the mix of cynicism and sentimentality.
Okay.
Yeah. Elf is silly and over the top.
Yeah.
But deep down, it's a story about how important family is, about believing in good things even when the world seems bad.
Right.
And that idea that even grown-ups need a little bit of that childlike wonder.
It's especially around the holidays.
Exactly. And it's a message that people really connect with.
So it's not just about escaping reality.
No, it's about remembering what's important.
Right. Like connection, kindness, joy.
And Elf delivers that message without being preachy.
Yeah.
It's all wrapped up in this funny, crazy package.
Which makes it easier to take.
Exactly. You're laughing one minute and the next you feel something, you know?
Right.
It's really clever.
I think you've hit on something there. Elf isn't afraid to be sentimental,
Right.
but it doesn't take itself too seriously either.
Exactly. It's like it's saying, yeah, this is all kind of ridiculous, but wouldn't it be nice if it were real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes Elf more than just a funny holiday movie.
Yeah.
It's not afraid to be funny and sincere at the same time, silly and heartwarming.
It embraces how messy life is, how complicated relationships are. Yeah.
And reminds us that even when things are crazy, there can still be magic.
I love that. But is Elf really a classic?
Well, that's a big question. We'll try to answer it as we wrap up our deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent this whole episode breaking down Elf.
Yeah.
From like how it was made to the kind of jokes it uses.
Right.
We even talked about whether the humor actually works or if it's just too much, you know.
Right.
But the big question is still out there. Can we actually call Elf a classic?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's a tough one. But I think before we can even answer it, we need to figure out what classic even means.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, is it just about critics loving it? Or how much money it made?
Right.
Or is it something more, something you can't really put your finger on?
I think it's got to be more than just those things. Because Elf wasn't exactly a hit with the critics when it came out.
Yeah.
It did well at the box office, sure. But a lot of the reviews were kind of, hey.
Right.
And yet here we are, like 20 years later.
Right.
Still talking about it, still trying to figure it out.
It definitely made an impact.
It hit a nerve somehow.
And I think that nerve is nostalgia. But not just any nostalgia. Elf makes you miss a very specific time, like a time before everything was ironic and cynical.
Yeah.
It's the early 2000s, but it also feels like those old Christmas specials, you know?
Right.
The Rankin Bass ones.
Yeah.
That feeling of just pure wonder that you don't really see much anymore.
Yeah, you're right. There's this longing for that sincerity.
Earnestness.
Yeah, that Elf just throws at you.
And it's funny because for a movie that's so over the top,
Yeah.
it's also got a lot of heart.
It does Buddy trying to connect with his dad, trying to spread Christmas cheer.
Right.
It's like deep down, we all want that, to connect with people, to belong.
Exactly. And that's what makes Elf more than just a silly Christmas movie.
Yeah.
It's about family, who you are, what your purpose is.
Big questions.
Yeah. And it tackles them in this light, funny way so that anyone can enjoy it.
We talked before about how Favreau, coming from that indie world, shaped the movie.
Oh.
And I think that's a big part of why it works.
Mm-hmm.
There's this improvisational feel, you know, like it's loose, which lets those real emotional moments happen.
It feels natural.
Yeah.
And you can see that in Favreau's other movies, too.
Oh, yeah.
Even the Marvel ones. He always cares about the characters, about those little human moments.
Right, even in all the action.
It makes you care about what's happening.
Okay, so we've got nostalgia, we've got heart, we've got Favreau's vision.
Right.
But is that enough to make Elf a classic?
Here's the thing about classics. They don't fit neatly into any box.
Okay.
They're often messy, they've got problems, they even divide people.
Yeah, that's true.
But they stick around because they capture something true about being human.
Yeah.
And I think Elf, with all its silliness and sweetness, does that. It reminds us that joy is important, that connecting with others matters, and that magic can be found in the most unexpected places.
That's a great way to put it. A classic doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to connect with people.
And Elf definitely connects with a lot of people.
Millions.
It's become part of how we celebrate the holidays.
The tradition.
Yeah, something that brings us comfort and makes us laugh.
Yeah.
And that's pretty special for any movie.
It is. And I think it's also worth pointing out that Elf is more than just a movie now.
What do you mean?
It's like this whole cultural thing. We quote Buddy's lines.
Right.
We sing the songs.
Santa, I know him.
Exactly. We even dress up like him.
for Halloween.
It's become part of us,
Yeah, it's everywhere.
in a way that most movies don't.
Yeah.
So maybe the question isn't whether Elf is a classic, but what kind of classic it is. It's not high art, it's not some deep masterpiece.
Right.
But it's special.
It is. It's the modern classic, a product of its time. But it also goes beyond that. It speaks to something basic about us.
About being human.
Yeah, our need to connect, to laugh, to find a little bit of magic in our lives.
And that's worth celebrating.
It is.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Elf, we'll leave you with this: what makes a movie a classic for you?
Ooh, good question.
What movies bring you joy that really speak to you?
Yeah.
Think about it, talk about it with your friends.
Yeah.
Maybe even watch some of those favorites this holiday season.
Good idea.
And who knows, maybe you'll find something new to love about them, just like we did with Elf.
Happy holidays, everyone.